Like I said earlier, today's format is a little bit different than usual, but in some way or another, we always try to make these calls be an opportunity for grounding, to provide you with information and strategic orientation from movement leaders that you can trust, and to give you concrete things that you can do to get off the noisy hamster wheel of information and misinformation that's being thrown at you and back to power building activities. I want to remind you about our regularly scheduled program. We have a call on September 18th where we're going to prepare for the final sprint of the general election. On October 16th, we're going to keep fighting our way through and be ready for any October surprises. And then on November 7th, we're going to gather immediately after the election and prepare for whatever is next. As always, if you like what we're doing and you want to be a part of this online community that we're building, you want to be plugged in for meaningful work, including ways to get involved offline, I need you to text mass call, 2 words, MASS space CALL to 30403. By texting mass call to 30403, we're going to be able to plug you into the ongoing opportunities to build with us that are ever present. Here are some examples of the things that we're asking people to do right now. You can take the Block and Build pledge to defeat MAGA this fall. You can sign up with WFP and seed the vote to deploy and canvass in battleground states. You can join Working Families Power to send personalized selfie postcards to remind your friends and your family members to vote this November. And we're going to make sure that links get out in the chat. And we're also, for folks that are watching on the live streams, if you text mass call to 30403, you'll get access to these links. So again, text mass call to 30403. So we can get going on these updates coming to you. And so you can spread the word to others about what we're doing here. Okay, now let's dig in to the time with our special guest this afternoon. My family, Adrienne Marie Brown and Maurice Mitchell. As leaders, both of these people tend to both the heart and the head of our movement. I want to dig into the evolving strategic conditions of the moment and how our movement should be thinking about adapting to this moment. So Maurice, let's start with you. You are in Chicago and you took part in more events than I think I have hairs on my head in and around the convention. You talked about the need for us to hold a strategy that allows us to do more than one thing at one time. So I want you to do a few things just to get us in here. Like, tell us more about what you experienced, tell us more about that, and tell us how you feel about that approach after this week. And just, generally tell us what the hell happened. Like, what is the DNC? What does it mean to us? What should we be paying attention to?
Well, before I get into that, I just want to say how much I'm happy to be here with you and with everybody who's Zooming in or streaming in. And the fact that we're able to virtually be in community together, that is such a blessing. And I also want to just lift you up because you've been like holding us and ministering to us and sort of weaving all of the contradictions into something that is coherent and helpful for us to make meaning in a world that often doesn't make any sense. So just thank you for your leadership. And if people in the chat, if people in the Zoom chat, wherever you are in the stream, you could just lift up Ashley Henderson and all of the work that she does in order to hold us, please do so. We need to give our people their flowers today. And I wanted to give you your flowers in front of our virtual audience today. But to answer the question, I just finished the DNC. It was 4 days of everything on 10, right? The spectacle and the sort of story making of the DNC, from a 0 to 10, it was on 15. The intense contradictions and sometimes heartbreaking contradictions of the limitations of capitalism, of the limitations of the two-party system, that was on 10. The possibilities of our movements, that was on 10. So I was at protest. There was a really breathtaking demonstration and direct action on the grounds of the DNC that I was privy to, that our comrades in Uncommitted were engaging with. There were parties, people were celebrating the excitement, and the excitement was authentic and real, right? Because people recognize the history of this moment. And excitement both around what it means to be in your Black body or in your Black woman body, or in your South Asian body in this moment as VP Harris is ascending, and then also the like real possibilities for movement organizations to push this administration, right? And then also there was a sense of loss around the fact that the DNC could not platform even one Palestinian. All of those things were happening, and all those things were happening inside my body, right? So at the same time that John Legend and Sheila Ebe were doing a Prince tribute, which was actually exhilarating, our comrades were engaging in a direct action because a Palestinian American wasn't being platformed, which was heartbreaking. And both of those things were real. And I think it was just an expression of the contradictions and why we need political homes, why we need political community, because there's no way of making sense on your own of all of those dynamics. There's no way of metabolizing all those things without having community like this to make sense of it, and then to understand, given all of those inputs, how to move our agenda forward.
Thank you, Mo. Thank you, Mo, and thank you for being there and repping our people so well. We're grateful. Now I want to kick it to you, AMB. I want you to reflect on, I feel like you talk all the time. Like we've been begging you for as long as I've known you to be our strategic North Star. Like tell us what you want us to do. And so I feel like many of us come to you desperately thirsty for you to share your brilliance about what we should be doing.
I love you, Ash, and I love you, Maurice, and I love everyone who's tuning in today. I feel like that's the thing I keep coming back to is like I've got a lot of love right now, and I think that we have to expand how we love each other in this moment. So I've been on a real journey with this election. I think in terms of elections in general, I go on these journeys. I'm a human. I feel like there's a ton to be afraid of right now, and there's a ton of opportunity, and we're trying to hold the balance of those two things. And I'm constantly trying to move towards the future I believe in, where we all have enough, where we all have sovereignty, and where we honor each other's humanity. So this election season has felt really decentering, and I've been committed to learning in public. So I've been doing this conversation series, Election Time with A and B, trying to learn in public as quickly as I can. I talked with you, Ash. I talked with Malkia. I talked to Linda Sarsour. I was like, there's Palestinians on my DNC stage. There's Palestinians wherever I go and wherever I am. And all of that is me trying to ask about what strategies we're trying to move right now. What is the strategy, or what are the strategies that we need to pursue to get our people what they need and to get ourselves free? And what is the strategy we need to pursue to change the course of genocide in Gaza, in Palestine? I keep asking, like, how do we get information in this moment? How do we do so in a way that focuses not just on the short-term goals of this election, which is an important election, but also lifts our eyes up towards this long-term horizon of where we're trying to get to? And I will say this, as an emergent strategist, which I'm always paying attention to the things that seem impossible. That's one of my favorite things is when people tell me it can't happen. That's not possible. Never going to do it. Give it up. You're being an idealist. And then when they happen and you just get to sit back and be like, what else can we do? So when Joe Biden dropped out of the race after everyone had told me it was impossible, I thought it was incredible. Just the energy of that to be like, whether they'll acknowledge it or not, we understand that organizing made that happen. Organizing makes everything happen that we want to happen. And it was powerful to see all these people actually move to get into formation behind Kamala, actually. Like, as an organizer, I was like, look at how quickly people picked up a new assignment and said, we're going to get in formation in our different organizations and our different spaces, and we're going to face down fascism. Or I keep saying, we're going to trounce MAGA, we're going to trounce the Confederacy. Like, it's time to actually put some ideas to bed, these bad ideas that have locked our people into moving against themselves. But I also am part of a movement that says we need to face down genocide. We need to lay that idea to rest for good. And so I've been sitting and holding the duality of both of those things, and holding a sense of respect for everyone who's fighting on both sides, on all sides of this thing, that these are all legitimate things that we desire, that we should have the right of sovereignty over our bodies, and Palestinians should be free, and there shouldn't be genocides in any other place, and working families here should have their rights. I believe we can do it all.
show you better than I can tell you that I know that's true. I know that's true. So let's get into it. Like, Amby, you just talked about, you've been holding these like election conversations
Yeah.
to even just for yourself understand what the hell is going on, right?
Yeah.
DNC then happens. What feels now fresh in that conversation to you that you think the folks that are watching this call should be paying attention to? And what questions does it give you for Mo?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that's been like really popping for me or really standing out in the pattern of conversations I had with people was the left is a lot more coherent than I thought it was. So this idea of block and build, like I tried to talk. I mean, I in those conversations, I've spoken with folks who are like immediately go Kamala. I've spoken to people who are revolutionary socialists. I've spoken to people across a wide range of perspectives. And I think what I found was how many people were like, we understand that we can do multiple things at the same time, and that we have to open up wide to hold multiple contradictions at the same time. So, and so everyone has a different job. One of the things I noticed at the DNC, especially watching these past few speeches, I was like, oh, what's Michelle Obama's job? What's President Obama's job? What's everyone's job here? And when I walked away last night, I was like, Kamala's job is to get people very excited about the status quo, right? To convince people that she can maintain and increase our sense of normalcy. That's her job. And so everything I heard her saying last night is like, it could get worse than this, but get excited because I can keep it like it is, right? Mostly I can keep it like it is. And what I witnessed in the audience was keeping it like it is with a Black person in power for a lot of people is going to do what they need, right? Especially a Black woman. I was looking at the Black women's faces and I was moved less by what she was saying, but why the Black women's faces in the audience and just being like, right, this matters. This does matter. We don't have to set aside that it matters to also hold that other things are true. But we have a different job, right? As organizers, as movements, our job is to course correct every place where our current norms are on the spectrum of harm, right? So right now, like in this past week, the pressure was, why isn't there a Palestinian voice on the DNC stage? Not because we don't know why there's not one there. We all understand that the DNC, the hope message right now, they can't figure out how to hold the contradiction of what the Democratic Party is actually doing in Palestine. So if you can't hold that contradiction, you're not going to come up on stage and be like, let's bring the contradiction into the light, right? But I think we can bring the contradiction to the light because we are actually part of a movement that holds Black people and Palestinians as one entity, that we are all in one community here. So our job is to also notice, and I heard this from several people last night in the debrief, that she did speak about Palestinians in a way we have never heard a presidential candidate speak about Palestinians, especially not from that stage. She said words that now we have to organize into because we're unsatisfied, right? I'm not satisfied that a Palestinian didn't speak there, and I'm not satisfied at all. I'm angry with this administration. I get to hold all that. And I still understand what the most strategic moves are to make this fall and what to move people towards. And I think that we have to have a movement broad enough to hold our grief and our rage and the excitement and the possibility. And I think move us to a place where fear is not the primary organizing emotion that we're working inside of. So those are some of the things that came up for me. I'm like, it was a lot, it's a lot, but I really appreciated Michelle Obama, her faces. And I really appreciate her saying that this is an unfinished promise of America. I want to sit down with her because I'm like, I think that I always identify as a post-nationalist, but I'm like, I don't know that America made the promise you think it made. I think we're all hearing what we want to hear. I think it's not too late to articulate what the promise actually needs to be. And when she said unfinished, I was like, I think you're talking about an existing sentence. I'm talking about rewriting the sentence. And I want to ask a bunch of people to get in this boat with rewriting that sentence with us.
Absolutely. Mo, I mean, you're still like literally metabolizing the last 4 days of the DNC. It's just like, what do you think we need to know about what happened in that space? Who was there? Like what the convention even is? And for those of us, especially for those of us that are like like WFP dues paying members, how is it different than what we did at the Working Families Party National Convention?
So I have to say I was taking a lot of notes as somebody who takes very seriously building a political project and building a political party. And the thing that I, as an organizer, really authentically appreciated was that these are just regular people. These are the people inside of the Democratic Party that actually deeply believe. And I guess some of us who are outside of it might like have a side eye to, or might be cynical about, like, these people actually believe it. A lot of them aren't paid. They're just people who go really hard in counties and states that the Democratic Party has forgotten, and they are committed to whatever that sentence is in their head, right? And there's a different sentence for every single one of them. And so I truly appreciated that. And it was genuine. There was a lot of authenticity and genuine, like, desire to complete that sentence that was like grassroots from the thousands of people that were there, right? I also recognize the differences between the DNC and the Working Families Party, right? And so because we're concerned with class and actually the class struggle, and we have a different understanding of what the fight is, right? I saw in the DNC the fact that there's a labor wing, right? And so I sat with Sean yesterday. I sat with Sean Fain in the UAW space. The other day I was with the teachers union, but also organized capital is there. Like, they're there, right? And so the Democratic Party is a big tent that includes Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and organized capital and APAC and the banks. And so all of those lobbyists are around, right? And so therefore you see the trappings of that exclusivity. Which badge do you have? What clearance can you get? Where you can sit? All based on hierarchies and all based on who's in and who's out. And sometimes that's all theater, right? Like, there's like spaces where nobody's at anyhow that requires all of these levels of security to get in and all of these badges. So that was on display. I also saw the coalition. So like I said, we saw labor movements and I saw labor power. I saw the power of capital. I saw the power of APAC, right? It was present in the fact, in the reality of who wasn't present where, right? And we were all taking notes. And I could tell you for the next WFP convention, because we held our first ever national convention in Philadelphia. And for those of you that were there, that was almost a spiritual experience, right? I imagine what it would look like in a few years if we 10x'd that experience, not just in scale, but in depth, right? And I saw a lot of scale, but for us, we're not just concerned with scale and spectacle, because in some ways they are telling their storytelling through that spectacle. But what we can do as a grassroots party that's interested in building deeply the sense of power of each and every one of our activists, how do we go deeper? Right? How can we go deeper? And then the other thing is, how do we include the multitudes, right? So how do we put on display the yes and, right? In the sense of, like, the Democratic Party, Adrian, you're right. They could only hold so many contradictions, right? But how do we put on display the beautiful messiness of our differences and say, like, this is a strength, the differences in tactics, the differences in perspectives, and make that like our secret sauce? That's something that I want to explore further for a future party assembly someplace else, on another scale, on another level of depth, like where we could actually showcase the work, the sentence making. And then the last thing, how can we complete that sentence? How can we make the convention about rewriting the sentence? Because, like, there's ways that you could look at the fact that people have their different ideas about what Obama meant by hope and change, or what Harris might mean by when we fight, we win. You could look at that cynically, or you could look at that as an opportunity. The fact that that sentence means a lot of different things, there's nothing that says that we collectively as the left can't be the authors of what America actually means and what the American identity is. That certainly is what the right is attempting to do.
I'm like,
All right. No, we're going to start to
I mean,
lose you, but Adrian, I really want to know what you think about that.
I know, I'm like, I'm lit. I mean, it is exactly this piece, right? That most of the political spaces that we get told are supposed to be political home, right? They're actually about reducing difference And one of the things that we're trying to hold on to is like the difference is the strength. A difference of is the strength. And when you actually are working with working class people, when you're actually organizing people, they don't all have the same opinion. They each have a distinct opinion. In the conversation series I was doing, I spoke with Sindolo Diamina from the Carolina Federation in North Carolina, which is where I live, Durham, North Carolina. What up? And Sindolo was talking about how we throw down with organizations that are committed to building independent political power. And I want to keep inviting people to do that right now, to keep finding political home where you get to be many different ways rather than political home where you're supposed to sign on and just be one way. Because that's, even last night I was like, oh, I can see how exciting there's a sense of belonging in that space. And people are all hungry for that. That's a human need. We need to belong. But I think that we can only get that belonging if we learn to be a part of spaces that don't look down on our people. And part of what I see happen sometimes with us is we start to really disrespect our people. We can disrespect Black women's joy. I had people coming into my space talking to me about, you don't care about Palestine, you're a genocide. I'm like, well, hold up. I've only spent 10 and a half months plus all the years of my life since I learned about Palestine working on this. So you can hold that I also feel the joy of Black women right now. I can also hold my grief and my rage for Palestinians and for the Sudan and for the Congo and for the other places that are impacted by, not just impacted by, that are under the thumb of this nation. Like, we hold an analysis of what the US is with clear eyes. And I want people to get into as many organizations, as many spaces as possible where you say, can we look with clear eyes at what it is, not turning on each other, but getting side by side and looking at these very wealthy elite people who want to destroy the world, disconnect us from the earth, and take everything from us. We live on an abundant planet that has enough for us. Get yourself into an independent political space that is interested in growing the terrain in which we get to be in right relationship with the planet and in right relationship with each other. And also practice that. Practice that. That might mean getting offline to practice that. That might mean door knocking with your own neighbors to practice that. That might mean being a part of the political education for the people you find so ignorant. Go practice that. I tell you what, nobody learns by you yelling them down, right? People learn by you sitting them down. People learn by you taking their hand. People learn by you lovingly gathering them in, right? And I see us doing that. I was so moved by the sit-in that happened at the DNC. I was so moved by watching all these different people hold each other and say, we can hold this grief and we know we deserve more. That's all of us. That's all of us. We all deserve more, and only organizing will get us more. Only organizing has ever gotten us more. So I feel excited because in these moments when people are awakened and lifted up about organizing, that's when we can actually move the furthest. And I think if we stay focused on, okay, this strategy, Block MAGA, Block fascism, that actually serves every single movement. And I say that with my whole heart and my whole chest. I've really talked to everyone I can about it. There's no other move I can see that has as much of a positive impact for as many people as that one right now. Okay. So yeah, I feel clear. My marching orders feel very clear right now.
Mm.
So many like golden gems in this.
Oh,
We could do this all day. I wish we had more time. Oh.
Ash, there's one thing that I really appreciate that I heard from Adrian. It's around, I want to really lean into this question of joy because so many people since Biden announced that he was stepping down from the top of the ticket.
Hallelujah. Sorry.
Hallelujah.
Just hallelujah.
Have been experiencing joy. And I want people to meet people's emotions with curiosity, right? Like, because underneath that joy, there's so many different textures, and people are arriving at that joy from different places and for different places. Some people are super grateful that that Biden is leaving the top of the ticket for so many reasons. Some people are super deeply emotive and grateful that for the first time there might be a woman or a Black woman or a Black and South Asian woman or multiracial woman at the top of the ticket. Some people might be holding the possibilities of what they could organize. And what I would, I guess, caution anybody to do is flatten people's emotions, right? And to suggest that joy is operating on like a little thin spectrum, but it's like underneath that joy can be all these complexities, and people could actually be like, I am authentically fired up. Like I will tell you, Maurice Mitchell is authentically fired up and authentically in a place of joy. I also hold all of my concerns and reservations. I also hold and am very clear about what country I live in. I'm very clear about the Democratic Party as an institution, what it can and can't do. I'm very clear about what the President of the United States does on a regular basis and what any president will do with my joy. And my joy isn't grounded in, identity, like slim neoliberal identity politics. My joy is grounded in the organizing that I know we can do on the other side of this election if we win and defeat MAGA. And the fact that the prospects of doing that have increased, like, I don't know, tenfold. And also the reality that it's going to be really hard to do that. It's going to be a close election, but we're that much closer because of the change of conditions. And I also feel I went to Howard. You know what I'm saying? So like there was a bunch of Howardites. I got randomly plugged into like a bunch of Howardites were running through the convention center, and I ended up inside of a Howard University picture. And somebody said HU. I said, I said it with my full chest. And I also recognized that a fellow Bison might be president, and a part of me is beaming because of that. But that part of me is not disconnected from the part of me that understands that the neoliberal project has failed, and we need to engage in a long-term left project in order to create something new that has never been realized in this country or the world. We could actually hold all those things as we express joy. And when you see somebody expressing joy, don't assume that that is unreserved joy or joy that isn't being shown through a prism of all the complexities. Like we're able to hold those things, and Black people in particular have demonstrated our ability to hold all those things, right? And so when people, as a Black person, when people lecture me about how I can express my emotions, I get a little bit skeptical, right? Because I'm like, no. Like Black joy actually operates on many, many different spectrums. And we've taught this country how to hold many, many different things. And so I want people to be curious about where people's joy is coming from, and not simply assume that people are expressing unreserved joy that doesn't have an eye towards all the multitudes and the fact that we can't experience sorrow and joy. I go to funerals where I'm crying and laughing at the same time, which is to me a part of how we struggle as Black people and people in the margins through a lot of the insufferable things that these systems have developed and created for us, right? Like we're able to do both. We're able to do 3 things or 4 things, and our emotions are super complex, and that's what makes us human.
Mo, can I add something to that? I feel like there's this piece too, that there's all these things about time. And I feel like part of what I keep hearing from people is, we're not going to put Palestine, we're not going to wait. We can't wait. And I'm like, I feel like this is one of the most important parts. It's also not only can we hold multiple emotions at a time, but we can also move multiple campaigns and multiple strategies at a time. Like for me, every single day has to be the last day. Like I'm like, this has to be the last day. We have to organize, we have to put on a pressure on our existing administration that this is the last day of this. That's how everything that Noura has been doing, everything that the uncommitted movement is, like all of that, that is, the urgency cannot be overly expressed. And that we can hold that this isn't the most urgent time ever for Palestine, and it is a time when the most people ever have been in the world are talking about Palestine coherently, are talking about what the US is invested in coherently. That's happening at the same time as this struggle where I look around at queer people and trans people and women and everyone who's here in the US. This is an urgent moment for each of those struggles, and that's happening at the same time. And it's happening at the same time as this, for some people, having a Black woman president is the most exciting thing that's happened in their lifetime. That's all happening at the same time. And I feel like that's also what movement has to do, is be like, what time is it on the clock of the world? It's all of these times, and we can do all of these things. One thing I just keep telling people is, if this doesn't work for you, like if you cannot find it in your heart to participate in the Block the MAGA strategy, then don't. Keep organizing. Keep doing your organizing. That's
Right.
fine. That's actually fine. To
Mm.
me, that's what a mature movement is capable of doing, is holding multiple things as true at the same time, trying to build the most expansive move forward for our people, and also not lying about what time it is on the clock of the world. And it again brings me joy to see our movement operating at that level of maturity right now. We absolutely have to be there. So I just need to mix that in.
Oh, thank you for mixing it. We're making a gumbo, right?
We making gumbo, baby.
New Yorker
We're
talking
making a
about
gumbo.
making gumbo. You know, we're gonna recruit him one day. He's gonna be down here with us. Okay, and listen, I know I've kept you longer than I said I would, but I've got one more question for both of you. So, one of the things that we've yet to address that came up a lot in the chat while WFP members and friends were watching now candidate Harris's speech last night was like, she's talking all this jibber jabber, but where's the platform? And, our understanding is that the platform gets like, struggled through and finalized for the season at the DNC. And I think people came expecting for her to come out the gate being like policy, 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 policy. Now, while some of the people that were watching, myself included, were struggling to stay present because we were so frustrated with the lack of some of that, she started talking about policy. And so then, we see this interesting virtual thing where the thing we're complaining about is actually happening, but we weren't paying attention, so we missed it. All of that and more was happening while we were watching together last night. It was an incredible social experiment. So I want to hear from you all. Like, were there pieces of the DNC where platform did get discussed, either what the Dems are talking about doing or their opposition to Project 2025, that you think we should be paying attention to? Because the next panel is really going to talk about it sectorally. And if not, if there's nothing that you think that, they said feels smart enough or important enough or whatever, critical enough that we should be paying attention to it, what are we proposing in terms of what demands we should be pressuring? Like, obviously we talked about Palestine. Obviously we talked about repro on this call. What are the things, if there were like 5 demands that we were going to put up, what do y'all think they are?
I'll say for me, I was watching through the lens of Palestine. And so it was very much like that was the primary thing that I was paying attention to. And I was really, I was not surprised. So to be disappointed for me would include some surprise. I wasn't surprised. I felt like they stayed exactly where they have been on that for the most part. And so I think that's going to be the primary, for us, I feel like that means we have to put that at the top of our list of demands and of like what we're working on. Um, I was moved by the clear commitment on abortion and reproductive justice rights. And as someone who walks this world, you know, walks this world in a woman body, always worried about getting pregnant. I'm like, I need to have that right. Like it really is personal. Um, I think the climate pieces continue to be both important and elusive. And I feel like we speak about these things. The US is so out of alignment with what the rest of the world is already moving on when it comes to climate. But I did hear that mentioned, and I want to hear that worked on so much more. Um, I was grateful to hear about gun violence and to hear about addressing gun violence and addressing what gun safety looks like. I feel like I have to be honest, there's just very little about the Democratic Party that actually excites me. So for me, I'm in a place where I look at it with a lot of skepticism, but I see those as like, for me, I'm like the things that matter most at this point in our history is breaking with genocide, fully embracing this earth that we live on, fully embracing our right to have body sovereignty, fully embracing our right to have, the access to organizing, the access to protest, the access to stand up and participate in small d democracy wherever we are. I don't know about y'all, but we're in North Carolina. They put mask bans on so that people can't go to protest and be COVID safe. There's things like that that I feel like we need to really be mindful of. And Yeah, I think those are, for me, those feel like the primary pieces that I want to see. And then, of course, the economy, like, which for me, I always look at healthcare and job opportunity clicked into the same place because we live in this capitalist world where you only access healthcare through the work that you're able to do or have done in your life. So I was really holding on, holding that. And feeling like that to me continues to feel like the most exciting place where we can offer something different and something real to people. So yeah, those are the things that stood out to me. About you, Mo?
Wow, well, there were a lot of things. Like number one, what was clear to me was where we diverged. That there was some clarity around the fact that with their immigration policy, with their Gaza policy, there's divergence clearly. And to me, that's the area where we need to really lean into on the other side of this election, pushing and challenging. The other thing I want to say is that if folks remember, in 2020, Joe Biden didn't really run on a clear policy agenda, right? It wasn't really clear about what was in or what was out. There was a grassroots movement. A lot of the work that Bernie and his delegates and the movement around Bernie's campaign and also grassroots organizations laid the groundwork for what would become a lot of the progressive things that happened under the Biden-Harris administration. And so I think when we're talking about platform and we're talking about governance, it's important to hold that the things that we do now, the things that we do after the election, especially the people who get into the administration, because personnel is policy, and then the things that we do in the first 100 days, outside of the presidency and outside of the Democratic Party, will be essential in deciding what the platform looks like. I also heard her say Palestinian self-determination. Those are words that we need to make into policy. Those are words that we need to demand become a ceasefire and an arms embargo. I heard Tim Walz say housing and healthcare as a human right. Those are words that we need to translate into concrete policies and not bromides. But those are hooks that we as organizers can use in order to demand concrete policies from the grassroots, right? And so when they say those things, we need to hold them accountable. We need to work with them. We need to push them in order to make those things into policies. And we got the policies because many of the folks, some of the folks who are going to be joining us, have been building those policies from the grassroots for years. So I hear opportunities there. Now, again, I want to be grounded and clear-eyed about those opportunities. There are no guarantees. Those are opportunities that we need to earn through our organizing. And just like we are planning to organize and translate what those words mean like, there are people who hear that, who hear housing is a human right from the real estate lobby, that are going to come up with their ideas of what that looks like. And so there will be a struggle. And so we need to be prepared to be the most organized, to be the most grounded, and to be the most clear-eyed in order to make sure that our version of that becomes real in any governing moment. And the other things are, look, they're going to announce some more policies. I was heartened to hear that many of their policies are populist, and many of those policies come from the grassroots. I think they understand, and we need to challenge them on this, that the way that they win is by presenting a clear line that they are willing to fight for working people and fight against the corporate agenda. I think there's forces inside the Democratic Party that would want to push them in a different direction. It's our job to push them in that direction. And so there's organizing every single day that needs to happen, both inside the campaign with forces like ours who have endorsed the VP and Tim Walz, forces who are on the outside who haven't endorsed, grassroots organizations that don't get involved in electoral politics but are building grassroots alternatives, all have a role in shaping the policy, right? And which is why I always try to remind folks, we are not pundits. We should not be lulled into being political observers, simply observing and waiting and wondering what the campaign might do. We are political actors. We actually could shape what that looks like.
Whew,
I really,
yeah.
really, really love that, Mo. I just have to say, like, I really love that piece that we're the political shapers. Like, I think that there's something about taking responsibility that changes your life. And is one of the things that my mentor, Grace Lee Boggs, talked about is like, can we take responsibility for our communities? Can we take responsibility for our society? And what does that look like? And I will say it's harder than yelling at people on the internet. Organizing is much harder than yelling at people on the internet, but it is much more satisfying. You actually start to see the victory that happens at the small scale level, the victory that happens at the community level, the victory that happens when you actually change people's material lives for the better, and the victory that happens when you come together in unlikely alliances to get something. We are going to end genocide. We're going to get that. We're going to return ourselves to this planet. We're going to get that. It's not going to happen because we yelled at anybody on the internet. It's going to happen because we got in the streets with each other, and then we marched, we protested, we organized, we door knocked, we called people. So I just want to keep inviting people to take all the emotion you feel, whatever it is, and pour it into action.
Organizing is about what's good for the collective.
Yes.
And I have to belong to the collective to get the common good.
Yes.
So why would we build a party, a left, a movement, whatever, where people couldn't belong, comrades? It's both about the organizing. It's also about how we do the organizing. Y'all, oh my God, I could do that. I could listen to them speak for hours, but I promised that I would only keep them for 30 minutes, which I've already broken. So can we give it up one time for Maurice Mitchell and Adrienne Maree Brown for being beautiful, brilliant, principled, disciplined, rigorous leaders of our people? Just give it up one time. I want reactions. I want love in the chat. If you were online, and I want you to tag them on Instagram, I want you to tag them on Twitter. I'm refusing to call it that new shit. I need you to tag them on Facebook. I need you to love them up, because frankly, it's been hard. These people been working for the last 20, 30 years and have not stopped. And the next, 70 some days are going to be bananas. And so we're going to send the love and energy to them that they need to sustain them through this next wave, because they're going to be the ones that are giving that energy right back out to us in the field. So love, 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 love to each of you. Thank you so much for being here. And thanks for being voices of our movement. Thanks for modeling the kind of deep dialogue that we need to be in more in this movement of ours, right? Where we can talk about what we think. We can even maybe disagree, but at the end of the day, be really excited about continuing to be on the freedom road together. If we could do more of this and less of the fake fighting on the internet, we would all be better off. I also want to appreciate both of you for modeling how to hold the duality of things. Multiple things can be true at the same time, and sit in the middle of things that sometimes are really uncomfortable, that feel like contradictions, and look for new ways that those contradictions can resolve into a new synthesis and a new strategy. Maybe not even a new one, maybe the recovering of an old one, whatever it is. I just want to appreciate you all for holding duality and nuance and complexity, and doing it with such discipline and rigor and love for our people and patience for our people. As Adrienne says, this work is emergent, and what we pay attention to grows. It's iterative. I'm so happy that we have people like both of you helping us birth new strategies every day into the world. Give it up one more time for Adrienne Maree Brown and the National Director of the Working Families Party, Maurice Mitchell. If you haven't already become a dues-paying member of the Working Families Party, this is your opportunity. The doors of our party are open. You can come and get down with us. And if you haven't signed up to listen to Adrienne Maree Brown's podcast, this is also your opportunity to do that. So make sure that you're following these incredible grassroots leaders that you can trust and support and amplifying their work. This is the opportunity to do that and to do it well. We can make our own echo chamber of people that we trust, so that we can get more of this good word out to the people that are desperately looking to belong to a movement like this. Now, without further ado, if I hadn't already been hyped about the incredible conversation that we just had, I get to bring up even more of my homies who are doing life-saving work all across the country. Again, like people who I know in my real life, who text me about my mom and them, who like actually have been in the fire with me. So I'm not just bullshitting you. These are some of the people that I go to when I need strategic leadership. I get to introduce you to Dawn Phillips from Right to the City. I get to introduce you to Montega Simmons from the Movement for Black Lives Action Fund. I get to introduce you to my sister, Grayson Martinez Rosas, who you already know because she's been throwing down with United We Dream for a minute. So give it up for them. And we have one more special guest who I will introduce when she gets here. She got scooped for some really important interview, but hopefully she'll be here a little later. So I'm holding a secret in the bag, swag. We'll holler at her if she makes it. And if she doesn't, I'll tell you who it was and we'll send her love. Okay. So let's get into it because I don't want to be disrespectful about how much time I'm going to take from you all on a Friday afternoon. Don, let's start with you. You have been on a previous mass call talking about the incredible work of Right to the City, who y'all are, what you're doing, and about the state of housing justice. Can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of having housing justice on the agenda or the platform, ours and the Democrats, and what must be done in this season by the Harris Walls ticket and by us as voters or concerned folks that care about affordable housing to make it so?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ash. And everyone, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here having this really important conversation with all of you. So I'm Dawn Phillips. I'm the Executive Director of Right to the City Action. So I think where I want to start is just by kind of echoing what Maurice named earlier. So much of what we heard this week in terms of the economic agenda that was being put out in the DNC platform and from the convention stage really reflects and is a direct result of our movements organizing for what our people deeply need. And finally, after decades of that protracted organizing, we are seeing that housing is being finally named as one of the issues and the kind of social concerns that can no longer be ignored. The work of our member organizations nationally and that of our colleagues at the Center for Popular Democracy, the Tenant Union Federation, People's Action, and many, many more is exactly why Vice Presidential candidate Walz named housing and healthcare as human rights in his acceptance speech. And it is this concerted organizing that led 3 former presidents and VP Harris herself highlighting housing in their speeches and naming housing in the Democratic Party platform, which is something that actually has not happened in decades. Like Adrian was saying, there are significant openings coming out of this week, but an opening is only as impactful as our ability to lean in and continue to push for the solutions that our communities need. Now, a lot of what was offered this week to address the housing crisis actually represents a narrow and limited set of solutions, right? If we are going to ensure that life actually gets better for working class renters and homeowners, we are going to have to push for a much more expanded and transformative set of policies and proposals, including things like rent control, tenant rights, eviction protections, capping rents for federally financed mortgages, holding corporate landlords accountable, social housing, on and on. In short, what I'm trying to say is there is a lot more that we're going to have to do to ensure that the Democrats will work to enact the real and true solutions once they are in office. What was offered this week is the least of what our people need. And we have to be doing a lot more moving forward to make sure that we fight for and win what our people need and not the minimal concessions that are currently being offered, right? So the openings that we saw this week are a direct result of the growing power of working class renters and homeowners and our ability to be an undeniable and effective force within the broader coalition that is going to be required to defeat MAGA in November, keep Trump out of the White House, and take back the House. So our work ahead is very clear, at least as far as we see it. We need to talk to our loved ones, to as many people in our communities as possible. We need to go beyond our comfort zones and lean into having hard conversations with folks who maybe think differently and feel differently than we do. And this is why we at Right to the City Action will be working with our comrades at Movement for Black Lives, Working Families Party, SURGE, Center for Political Democracy, People's Action, Seat the Vote, and so many others to stay focused on organizing voters to win permanently affordable, safe, and sustainable housing, as well as an end to the genocide in Palestine and to US arms in Israel, right? So we have weeks to do this, and we are fired up to do this with all of you. As Mo said, we are not observers, we are actors in actively shaping the future that we need and want.
Come on, Di. Preach a word in this place. We believe that there could be a reality where nobody's struggling to have a house, y'all. Like, it's not impossible. These are not big asks, right? It's just a will of our imagination and a will of our discipline to get it done, right? So give it up one time to the Right to the City fam. Thank you, Don, for coming back and schooling us. We appreciate and love you. Montega, I'm going to come to you next. And our special guest is here, y'all. You can see her on the screen. It's Hillary Holly. You might remember her from the front line because she was throwing down our calls then. You might remember her because she was a huge part of why Fair Fight is so badass, and even now is helping lead incredible work for the CARE agenda. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm going to let her tell you herself, but y'all remember her, and she's here. So Montega, I'm coming to you. You, I mean, have been so critical to the leadership and the development of the movement for Black lives, and are here in the capacity of M4BL Action Fund. I'm sure this season for you and for the members of M4BL all over the country, but like individual members of the organizations that are members of the movement for Black lives, I'm sure all of them have been really working very hard and have been really stressed out. And have been finding opportunities for joy in the same way that Mo was talking about, the way we do Black joy. So can you speak about how the work of electoral justice and building independent Black political power that once and for all breaks the back of the new Jim Crow looks like now, and what we might need to be learning about what M4BL is up to, how we can throw down for it, and what it means that this country might be electing the first Black woman president?
Yeah, light work. Thank you, Vash. Good to be with you, comrades. It's always good to be in space with folks who find like deep alignment, as I think everybody here knows. Electoral space ain't always hard for movement folks, and especially for Black movement. But for M4BL in the wake of the 2016 elections, along with our siblings, like in other sectors of movement, including, Black liberation, migration work, worker justice, housing justice, we actually had to have some hard, like, internal discussions and think about like what we need to do to reposition ourselves. And specifically, like, love to you, comrades, who all like came together in building what we now call the rising majority to think about long-term strategy and what it means to really contend for power. Explicitly Black movement, it's been a long history of wrestling with questions around electoral work, and especially tensions of fighting inside a political duopoly. So M4BL in that year decided to make an explicit commitment to support the more than 120 organizations that relate to us, to build the capacity to engage in the real struggle for power on all fronts, including electoral. So our orientation to this has always been rooted in a deeply anti-imperialist politic that's not committed to either party. So we're nonpartisan. In fact, our commitment is to build the power of our people to act independently as a force outside that has the strength to challenge and posit demands directly to the state. So for us, that's why it's important for us to be in strategic relationship with the Working Families Party in moments especially like this. Part of what that means for us is, despite Kamala being a Black woman contending for the highest seat of power, our demands remain the same. This administration, of which she is a part, has funneled billions of dollars into policing and a spectrum of militarism, including supporting genocidal assaults on Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, not to mention Haiti and the Sudan. One of the first demands that actually emerged from the streets of Ferguson, even before M4BL was formalized, was a call to demilitarization. So from Cop City to Gaza, like this is actually an underlying call from our movement. So this week, it was especially important for members of the Movement for Black Lives and our siblings in the rising majority to stand with Uncommitted and our Palestinian comrades in their demand not just for ceasefire, but on an arms embargo. We also recognize that specifically for her, while she's running for the top seat, Biden is still the president. And there are people in his administration that have refused to recognize that Palestinian lives have any value. So, with comrades over the course of the last few weeks, and honestly, for some of them, this has been in the work for more than a month, they did petition the campaign to show something different by offering space on the stage just for someone to speak to the Palestinian experience. The campaign's denial of that, for me and for many others, really did crystallize a clear reflection between 2024 and 1964. In 1964, members of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party earned delegates to the Democratic National Convention with the intention of exposing the apartheid conditions that Black Mississippians endured, the disenfranchisement that Black Mississippians confronted, and the violence they actually had to survive on a daily basis. It's important for us to sit in that in part because these are the same conditions that Palestinians are facing on a daily basis today. These are the conditions that the United States and specifically this administration is continuing to fund. So our mission over the next 70 some odd days is to be in deep conversation with our community and specifically with Black folks, not to dissuade them from voting or specifically for voting for Kamala, but we need more voices to make sure that she makes a clear turn with regard to not only Palestine, but with US militarism. You can't say you stand on the shoulders of Shirley and not your course. You can't say you stand on the shoulders of Fanny and not stop this genocidal assault on Palestinians. You can't say you're standing on the shoulders of Ella and continue to shift billions of dollars toward Prop City every day. We know Black people are enthusiastic and passionate in this moment, and we're not trying to quell that. We want you joyful. We need your energy to advance the alternatives our people are actually fighting for in cities around the country every day. M4BL has a campaign building alternatives in more than 20 cities around the country. We need you to tap in. We need you to actually talk to whatever candidate you engage today. Everything that we fought for and gained in the last 60 years since 1964 is under assault. We have to make sure that as we fight to defend our rights, we can't let them continue to invisibilize and be complicit in the assault of our Palestinian family. So this fall, we're going to be in the streets, we're going to be on the blocks, we're going to be in homes and community spaces around the country, demanding accessible quality housing, demanding implementation of just and safe migration, demanding relief from austerity, demanding repair of the damage inflicted on our communities by policy. And we have to make sure that they continue to advance Cori Bush's People's Response Act. We have to make sure that they advance an embargo against the weapons and funding that have continually gone toward the state of Israel. In her acceptance speech last night, part of what she asserted was, we must be worthy of this moment. It's our charge to hold into that. And our people have to take that into every engagement with every candidate this electoral season. Thank you.
Thank you, Montega. Thank you, Movement for Black Lives. Thanks for always being the tip of the spear. Thank you. I know it's not easy. I remember in 2016 when we said it was apartheid and genocide happening. That was before October 7th. Zionists whooped our asses. So just thank you for continuing to be a marginalized and targeted community of souls that continues to like actually hold our feet to the fire around what our people deserve and what is required of us to do so. So thank you, Montega. Hillary Holly. Love, thank you for making this call. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for juggling all the things. We're so grateful that you're here. I mean, I want you to introduce the work because we haven't necessarily met all of our mass call homies, though you've been in our fam for forever. I want you to introduce yourself and the work that you're holding these days. And then question is like the care economy is it's like in the same way that Adrian was talking about intersectionality talk, that now it's becoming everybody means everything when they use that language. Feel like care economy is becoming a buzzword in a similar way. And so I want you, well, and let me finish the sentence, because it's not just becoming a buzzword because it's sexy. It's becoming a buzzword in no small part due to the incredible amount of work that your organization has done for years before it was cute, right? So tell us what you think about the Harris economic agenda, because when it dropped, everybody was like, care work, oh my God, care work, care work. So tell me what you think about what is happening in regards to the Harris Walls economic agenda, and what folks of goodwill that are on this call should be doing to ensure working class families win with a care agenda this electoral season.
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name's Hillary Holly, she, her pronouns. Calling in from Atlanta, Georgia. I got in from DNC yesterday. First, that was my first DNC, and I wouldn't miss this call for the world, because at the end of the day, y'all are my comrades and y'all are my people. So a little bit about me. I'm a Georgia girl, lived in Georgia my whole life, never lived anywhere else. I have been working with Georgia movement folks for over 10 years and really helped bring what I like to call electoral justice, like moving it to the South, really making sure that the South, when we said the South has something to say, we meant it not just in culture and music, but also through policy and showing up. And I think one thing that I at Care in Action is we believe in the Sun Belt, and we believe that Black and brown women workers are the crutch of this country. So about Care in Action, we like to call ourselves the political home for Black and brown women who care. We're talking about childcare workers. We're talking about home care workers. We're talking about house cleaners, nannies, all of which, y'all, the majority of which of all the workers I just named are not protected under the Fair Labor and Standards Act. And that is because when the Fair Labor and Standards Act was passed, Northern folks, people like to blame it on the segregationists, but it was the Northern folks too, wanted to make sure that we could still exploit three groups of workers: disabled workers, farm workers, and domestic workers, because without those three workers, our economy simply cannot exist. Capitalism could not exist without the exploitation of those workers, and they were primarily Black and brown women and men. And so because of that, house cleaners, childcare workers, care workers, they average $23,000 a year. And here's the other thing. I like to say, not only do we represent these workers, but the workers that we represent are the center of our families. So when we talk about generational poverty, we have to think about one of the main reasons why Black and brown folks live in generational poverty is because the women and the matriarchs of our family have never been invested in, and they have never received the true benefits and dignity that the majority of voters of other workers in this country get, not the majority, some in this country get to experience. And that became very clear, right, in 2020 when the pandemic hit. So at that time, everyone was like, essential workers, care workers are now essential, childcare workers are now essential. And so we and our ancestors, Dorothy Bolden and those who came before us, could say we've always been essential, but we saw it as an opportunity. We saw it as an opportunity to make sure that when we go to help working families be able to still access childcare, access aging and disability care during the pandemic, this is an opportunity to finally make sure that with those emergency dollars comes emergency dollars into the wages and benefits of these workers. And here was the big deal. For a long time, affordable childcare, aging and disability care, it remained in the women and gender policy platforms of the majority of Democrats. However, under Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, to be honest, we saw it centered in the economic agenda, right? And one of the reasons why we're going so hard in this election cycle is because in 2021, they made sure that care was a part of Build Back Better. If we want to make sure that folks can return to work, if we want to make sure that we're actually going to grow and build a green industry, we have to make sure that people can actually afford to work. So what does that mean? For a lot of families, like let's talk about this in Georgia. So in Georgia, for example, there's a plant that's opening up in Southeast Georgia. They cannot find workers right now because there is no childcare. They cannot find workers because there are not enough nursing homes. So folks are having to help care for their aging parents, right? So we got this big infrastructure bill, but we didn't get a lot of the most of the funding that we needed to help families choose to go to work. And what does this also mean? So now people are now saying it might be cheaper, because the other thing, sorry, I'm all over the place. The DNC got me everywhere. But a lot of this stuff is also unaffordable. So it's one thing, damned if you can find it, but if you can't find it, it's unaffordable. So when we talk about housing, when we talk about food, the other big thing is childcare. Y'all, in 32 states, childcare is more expensive than rent. Childcare is more expensive than college tuition. Think about that. And so people are having to choose between paying the rent or making sure that their children have somewhere safe to go when they go to work. People are having to choose between paying the groceries or making sure that their aging loved one can have care when they have to go to work. But a lot of things that are happening to working families right now are they're saying, I'm actually can't go to work because I can't find childcare, and it might be cheaper for me to stay home than go to work. So last night we heard Kamala Harris talk about the opportunity economy. And what she means is investing in childcare. Because here's the other thing, y'all, these Republicans, Kamala Harris in December asked for a $16 billion emergency fund into childcare, and these Republicans have still held it up. They're not moving on it. And to be clear, it's because they don't give a fuck. And if they do care, it's because they want to, all of it's going, they want to give it to private equity companies. So these corporate childcare providers can make profits and exploit the families. But we know that we can invest in it. Same thing in elder care. A lot of these agencies who families hire to help care for their aging or disabled loved ones are hoarding all of that money. And the workers are getting $11 an hour and the families are paying $25 an hour. And they're thinking it's going to the workers, but it's also going to these rich white folks. That's what's happening. The last thing I will say is paid leave. A lot of folks, y'all, they can't take off work to help care for sick loved ones or care for themselves. So we are also seeing for the first time the actual movement on getting a paid leave policy for all, which means that if I got to take off a couple days to go make sure that my Aunt Joan in Durham, North Carolina needs to go make sure that her medications are all set up and organized, I can still get paid to do so. That's what's at stake this election cycle. Because these other folks, they say they have a plan for all of it, but it is tax credits to private equity and corporations who will exploit the workers and exploit the families. And we also next year are going to be in a big tax fight. And this stuff costs money. And we know right now the Trump tax credits and tax credits are going to billionaires. We can fund everything that I'm talking about and more if a handful of billionaires paid their fair share in taxes. So that's what's at stake, Ashley. And that's what we've been working on. And that's what's exciting me right now. But again, we have so much where to go. But for Care in Action, our Northern Star is very clear and it's at reach.
Y'all better get into it. Care in Action. Make sure that you're following them. Make sure you're amplifying them. Make sure you're throwing down for these incredible grassroots communities of folks that are coming together around the care agenda, like the actual care agenda, not the co-opted care agenda. All right. Give it up one time for Hillary Holly, y'all. And now, last but certainly not least, is arguably one of my favorite humans on the planet. G, come on in the room. You know, this is y'all, the executive director of United We Dream Action. They are badasses. I'm gonna let G talk about who they are, but you're familiar because it's arguably the largest organization of dreamers in the country, which is incredible. You know, G, you've been doing this immigrant justice work for a really long time.
Yes.
And it's all too often really thankless. You know, other sectors of movement folks who we love, myself included, have sometimes been slow to figure out how to be in solidarity in a meaningful way that's beyond just the symbolic. So one, just thank you for your leadership. And then two, it's like, you know, we've heard all sorts of things about what Biden has or hasn't done for immigrant justice, and we're hearing lip service to immigrant justice or doing something to have a more humane practice from the Harris-Walz administration, supposedly through the DNC. So based on what you've heard and what you do and what you've known, you know, knowing that you do this work across rural and urban landscapes across the country, that you have had to deal with the White House and have experienced the many challenges and opportunities that are there. You've made impossible things. You and your base have made impossible things possible in this country, despite the bad practices of electeds on both sides of the aisle, right? Like, I'm not just talking about Republicans here. I'm talking about the Democrats too. They've all been bad. So tell us what's next for the immigrant justice movement in the context of the recent, like most recent happenings at the DNC. Like, has your work shifted? What's it looking like?
Well, first, Ash, it's always nice and beautiful and awesome to spend time with you and to build power with you. I wanted to also say thank you to all of you for being in the space and choosing one another to make meaning together, to move together. That is what I believe is the antidote for all of the challenges that we face right now. Community, being able to come together in moments of uncertainty to chart a new pathway forward. So my name is Greisa Martinez Rosas. I'm undocumented, unafraid, queer as fuck, and unashamed. And I am the executive director of United We Dream Action. It's the political arm of the immigrant youth-led movement with millions of members and local groups across the US. That we exist is an act of rebellion against white supremacist power and politics, and I'm immensely proud of that. We're a place where young, poor people of color can find a voice and build power and practice at continuing to be catalytic change for this country. And our vision is to have a more equitable world where people have, all of us have the freedom to move, the freedom to stay, the freedom to work, to thrive, and to transform. That is our vision, not only for our lives as immigrants here in the US, but for all of us here in the US and across the globe. And part of what grounds us, or what we are practicing into, is something that Norma Wong talks about, which is to think about our work in the long arc. That leaders in the long arc deploy many means and many ways to drive a strategy. That we're strategists, storytellers, and policy creators. That we think in the micro and the macro all at the same time, and in many dimensions of time and space. That we know that the whole is more useful than the combination of the parts, and that we fight for what we love and have an orientation for big, big purposes. And so we don't forget about the wounds and deficiencies and the brokenness of this moment or of the past, but rather the leaders in the long arc turn and move beyond the fierce fights to take on the fiercest of possibilities. That is what we practice into. That is what we invite you to practice into, and young people all across the US. And so as I was preparing for this conversation, real talk, there was some really difficult moments in the last couple of years existing as an undocumented woman here in the US. In particular, because we see in states like Arizona, like my home state of Texas, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, you name it, across the South, there is an infrastructure, an anti-immigrant infrastructure being built by these governors to detain, deport, and sometimes kill undocumented people. And though at the core of what we do at United We Dream is to fight for protections for our people, we know that citizenship, that a social security number is not the lasting goal at the end of the day. It's a part of our long arc, as you call it. And so the last couple of days, I was so grateful to be able to experience Maurice and Adrian because they spoke to my heart. There was this sense of excitement and power to see and like all of these people coalesce around a child of immigrants, to say that this Black and brown powerful woman could be a president of the United States is also a victory for immigrants in the US, because it's a reminder of the gifts that we bring into the space, of the talent, of the heart, of the joy that is infused in who we are and how we fight. And to also see Border Patrol given a main stage speaking role, to see the ways in which there was a doubling down and a rightward shift into anti-immigrant policies, in particular in the border where people are coming to seek refuge because we told them as a country that that's who we were, is definitely the holding of those multiple truths. And so what we heard in the last couple of days, what has been difficult to navigate these moments and to be clear about, like, if I'm for pro-immigrant people, we've been 40 years in the desert without any manageable change in the lives of millions of undocumented folks. My parents have died and lived their lives as undocumented people without any reprieve. My mother was not able to have access to the salary that she deserved as a home care worker, or to the healthcare access that she deserved as she was fighting cancer, because of her undocumented status and because she was a brown Indigenous woman. All of those things are true. And the thing that is grounding me in this moment is what we've talked about, that the block and bridge is not just for the next 100 days or the next whatever days until the election. That the block and bridge strategy is a long-term strategy to be able to advance the vision that we see for the world. And though Kamala promised, or Vice President Harris promised to sign the border bill into office when she came in, that's because she's not counting on us to be like the political actors that we know we're going to be when that moment comes. So what we know at United We Dream Action is that we are fighting for the best terrain that we can to have lasting change in our communities, that we're not seeking saviors because we have ourselves and we have each other. We're seeking the right targets in this moment. And that what we're going to need as we move forward is not just as allies that come to us or with us when there's mass deportation or mass detentions in our TVs, but people that are wanting to walk with us to say that an immigrant vision, a pro-choice vision of the world, a pro-worker vision of the world is all of it together rather than the separate parts of it. And so I want to end with this moment that, like, yes, we're going to do everything that we can to have the right conditions come November. Yes, we're going to continue to struggle in the places where we find tension. And yes, we're going to continue to organize the day after November, after Election Day. And then at the end of the day, what we want to create is a future that will truly astonish the world, and the ability for our movement to respond in this moment. So yeah, we're not seeking saviors. We save one another. And as immigrants, we're ready to be able to be the protagonist, as we've always been, to remind the world what it looks like to put all of your effort and all of your body into dreaming up a world that is no longer, or may not be possible. And as people that have chosen to cross borders and cross rivers and oceans, both because we yearn for something better than what we had, or we were pushed out because of climate change, we are ready. Immigrants here in the US are ready to teach all of us what it looks like to move with integrity and intention, what it looks like to have courage enough to have roots in this country, even though not every part of the country supports us and welcomes us. And we're ready to continue to build this united front with the Rising Majority, with the Working Families Party, under the leadership of Black people, especially Black women. So I'm ready. Let's do this.
G got me hyped. She said, we gonna move with integrity. We not looking for, the group chat was going hard when the we not looking for no saviors happened. It was we were ready. We were excited. Like, what we're looking for is solidarity in practice. And that we actually have a lot to learn from our comrades in the immigrant justice movement. So thank you, G, for consistently showing up, for consistently being an incredibly grounded leader, and for all the ways that the work becomes more possible because of you and United We Dream Action. We love you. Give it up one time for Graysa Martinez Rosa. She's amazing. She's amazing. She's amazing. If you haven't followed the organization, if you aren't following her on socials, please sign up for the newsletter. Please absolutely go and follow her. She's a leader you can trust. And while we're at it, let's just give it up one time for every single brilliant human who was on that last panel. To Don Phillips for your courage, your disciplined, rigorous work, and to the Right to the City fam, to Montega and the Movement for Black Lives fam, to Hillary Holly, who literally came in hot, ready to go. That's with Care and Action. And again, our beloved Graysa Martinez Rosas for showing up on behalf of United We Dream Action. We love y'all. And now it's our turn to actually make some commitments to getting out of this place of thinking about the work and processing the work and feeling about the work, to really making some commitments about what we're going to do, right? We don't do these mass calls just to entertain people or to be intellectually stimulating. We do these calls to give us the information that we need to do meaningful work that builds the power of our people. Our measurement of success for these calls is, are more people activating and building more power successfully and sustainably? That's the work that we're trying to do. So we're going to launch a poll. And for those of you that have been on the mass calls, you've probably seen it. Feel free to participate again. For those of you that are new to the mass calls, this will be your first time to make this kind of embodied commitment to actually participating in the change that we wish to see this year. For those of you that are watching on streams that are not in the Zoom, so won't be able to participate in the Zoom poll, feel free to answer the questions in the chat anyway. You can answer on the Instagram live chats. You can answer on the Twitter and YouTube chats. That's totally fine. So let's launch the poll. What are your volunteer goals for 2024? What are you committed to doing? How do you want to build with us this year? How are you blocking MAGA this year? Take a second to write in your answer there. What are your volunteer goals in 2024? How do you want to build with us this year? And then what volunteer activities actually interest you? It's a multiple choice question, so you can click more than one. Maybe it's door knocking. Maybe it's phone banking. Maybe it's relational work with friends and family. Maybe you're recruiting activists to volunteer events or welcoming new volunteers to our digital activist spaces like the mass calls or phone banking. Helping to facilitate training calls and discussions. Maybe you're our political educator or leadership development lead. Or maybe you're sending a WFP selfie postcard with the Reach app to your friends and neighbors to remind them to vote in November. What volunteer activities get you excited? You're like, oh yeah, I would rock that. I would do well with that. So again, we want you to answer, what are your volunteer goals in 2024? How you want to build with us this year? Write that answer out. How do you want to block MAGA this year? And then which volunteer activities interest you? We'll give it a second for folks to get their answers in here. Tech team will give me a clue when we're getting close. What volunteer activities interest you, and what goals have you set to block and build in 2024? Tell us what you got. We're going to be about this work. We're going to see the change because we did it. All right, we're going to give it another couple of seconds. What volunteer goals have you set to block and build in 2024? What volunteer activities interest you so that the party can then respond to you and say, hey, loved one, we've got this thing right here. You can come and plug in. How might you be plugging into the building of independent political power for the working class in 2024? We'll give it one more round before we move to our call to action and start to close out our call. Last call. Put it in the chats or fill it out in the Zoom poll. What volunteer goals are you committed to in 2024 to block and build? And what volunteer activities interest you so that we can hold you accountable and give you multiple opportunities to participate in it over the next several weeks? All right. Comrades, thank you for participating in that. We're going to shut down the poll and you can expect to hear from us soon. Again, if you like what you're seeing here, if this has been useful, inspiring, grounding, if you've learned something, if you've had a disagreement, but it helped you sharpen your own argument, if you want to join this community, I need you to text mass call to 30403 so that we can hook you up. You can take the Block and Build pledge to defeat MAGA this fall. You can sign up with WFP and Seed the Vote to deploy and canvass in battleground states. You can join Working Families Power to send personalized selfie postcards to remind friends and family to vote this November. Remember, all of this work that we have envisioned about like what our prefigurative beloved community will look like when we win only comes to fruition if we do the work. So come and join us. Let's do this together. Today has been such an inspiring set of conversations. And I want to thank all of the people who spoke, especially because we asked them to do it so last minute. And they said yes enthusiastically. I also want to thank all of you who are out watching on Zoom or on the live streams or the recordings later. You know, last October, I personally was at another political party's convention, my political party. I joined with leaders of our movement for 3 joyful and powerful days in Philadelphia at the Working Families Party's inaugural national convention. I was transformed. When Mo said it was almost a spiritual experience, I would say it absolutely was a spiritual experience. One that grounded me, one that inspired me, one that recharged my batteries, and one that gave me my marching orders about what organizing I needed to do to build the kind of power that my people have always deserved. These political conventions are a chance for us to come together and to feel the power of our shared presence and to align on strategy. I left the WFP National Convention clearer than I have ever been that our task right now is to build a third force in our US political system. It is time. It is our time to do that. It's not easy. By no means do I want to belittle how much work is required to make that our reality, especially when the two parties write the rules that lock in place the two-party system that we currently have. However, we are not letting that stop us. We are building a long-term strategy for power. We are building an independent third political party force in this country that is for and by and of working class people of all races. And we're smart people. We know how to hold complexity and nuance and truth and compassion and fierce accountability and grace at the same time. We are building this third force in US politics, and we are doing it in the shell of the two-party system, but we're going to do it in a way that reaches to the best of our humanity, that is an invitation to dignity and belonging. So, as we watch the news over the next few days, where the pundits will process the state of the race after the DNC, the talking heads will tweet, the hot takes will be abundant on IG and Facebook, let's imagine a world not too far from now, when the WFP National Convention, with thousands of people at it, is inspiring you to be active. If you experience the joy and the hope that I experienced at the WFP convention then, I know you will believe me when I say that this is not only possible, but probable. And it won't be as long as we think till we get there. Until then, we're going to hold the duality of the immediate task at hand while also keeping one eye on the horizon towards the place we know we need to go. Through the storms and through the challenges, I believe that we're going to fly together. Until next time, see you on the call, our next call, September 18th. Be well and have a great weekend, beloveds.